Too many things on my desk.
Yeah. I'm going to hit the go live button, as in I
All right, great,
already did.
good.
Anyway, hi everybody, welcome to
Well,
Ramblemancy.
At what point?
Uh Honestly, I sort of
I'll
blacked
find
out
out.
and it's out somewhere. I don't think anything specific was happening. But anyway, hi
That was
everybody.
great. That's good. I
There
love
were
it.
several much more damning moments I could have done it during the entirety
oh
of
yeah,
that.
I was convinced that when I was standing up and dancing that you were gonna do it.
That specifically was one of them. Anyway, hi everybody. Welcome to Ramblemancy. Tonight we will be talking about TTRPGs from like with making hopefully we're going to be talking to people who are okay, let's try this again. Tonight we're going to be talking about TTRPGs, but specifically we're going to be talking to those of you who have little or no experience in TTRPGs, which is, probably not a whole lot of the people who are here tonight or who will be here, but you know, some of this stuff is always good to talk about even before. Um Now, if there are here's what I will say before I jump into announcements. Here is what I will say. If there are some of you folks who are here tonight who aren't very familiar with TTRPGs and we start getting into the weeds, uh, it's up to you to stop us and go, hold on a second, I don't understand what the fuck you just said. Because yeah, that's sort of the one of the problems with being as like immersed in all this stuff as we are is that we don't always there are lots of things that we take for granted that like wouldn't be obvious to somebody who is brand new or doesn't know as much. And so that I think is where y'all come in and just like stop us and go, "Hold on. You aren't making any goddamn sense. Back up." So, that's what I'm counting on y'all to do tonight. I so yeah. I don't understand anything I say, let alone anyone else. Fair enough, Quinn. Well, then I'm not sure that there's much else I can do to help you with that. But you can feel free to interrupt and derail us, and we'll do the best we can. um, so, yeah. Now, with that, I will get into our announcements tonight. Because I think I forgot one on Wednesday, and I did forget one
Oh,
on Wednesday. I forgot to mention that tomorrow night we will be doing our first ever Patreon town hall meeting. Um,
Whoop.
that will be hosted on Discord in the World Builders chat. So if those of you who are uh, supporting at that tier will already have access to that. Um, and if you are not and would like to participate or see it later, this is a good time to join. This is a good time to jump in. Um, if you are already one of our world builders and you can't make it, that's fine because we're gonna record it and then re-upload it later to Patreon so you can see it. It's not gonna be the most production heavy recording. It's literally just going to be us recording the Discord call that we'll be in, but you'll probably be able to see at least our faces, and that'll be, well, yeah. So, yeah, if you are a world builder and you have specific questions that you want to ask, but you can't be there, you can always post those questions in the world builders chat on the Discord, and we'll try to get to those pretty early on. That's what I got. That's all I have. We are currently working on the next short for Beyond the Roll on Patreon, our series of short adventures. Um, I announced on Wednesday that we'll be bringing back Dungeons and Dorm Rooms, our very first actual play that we did
rooms?
on this channel. Rooms? Sorry, that's right. Sorry,
Rooms?
it's been a long time. Hold on, let me back up. We're bringing back Dungeons and Dorm Rooms. Um,
Rooms?
thank you, thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
as is
so
tradition.
uh, so yeah, that's that. But I haven't announced anything else about that. So that you'll just have to check it out. Um, I think. Oh, this Tuesday is the Patreon writers room. So again, if you are a lot of stuff happening for the world builders this week. if you are a world builder, we're gonna be working on some stuff for that particular Beyond the Roll again. We're gonna be doing something a little bit different this time. You'll check the disc, check the thing, look at the read and you know what to do. It'll be in there.
There's a channel.
There's a
it's
channel.
called World Building. Yeah, check it. We'll
Join the world builders. We build worlds. Anyway,
Hell yeah.
but not like in the Douglas Adams way, where like you can get awards for like making really nice fjords.
It's too bad. I do make some very nice. Sorry, I couldn't finish.
Nice.
I couldn't finish. I do make some nice.
Some good fjords there.
I love all the little crinkly edges along the coastline.
Allow me some geography.
Mm.
I don't know. Meandering.
The Douglas Adams,
Anyway.
the Douglas Adams like nerd in me just like creeping in. Every so often, I have to remind everyone that I've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy at least 20 times.
Fair enough. Like, I think that's all I've got for announcements. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all we got. That's what we got for you right now. So, check all of that out. All of those things that I just said. Look at them. You know.
Yeah.
So, John, what do you got for us tonight?
I think like I'm going to also throw chat under the bus here, but I'm going to pitch to chat real quick. First off, are there any questions that people who have not played very many tabletop role-playing games or who don't play them at all, are there any questions that y'all have that you would like us to answer, or any things that are like seem like a barrier to entry for you, apart from some of the obvious, like finding a group of several people whose schedules all align, which is, I think, the hardest part of any tabletop role-playing game, is defeating the scheduling dragon.
I remember in high school when we thought we had a difficult time with that.
Mm-hmm.
No,
not nearly,
Man.
right?
I wish I could go back to high school me and be like, buddy, just wait until you're a full-time content creator. And then try and play schedule Tetris. But no, like, I don't know. I think like a good place to begin is maybe not necessarily like, what is a tabletop role-playing game? But like a little bit,
I
like,
mean,
what are these things that we do? And how do they work? So like, I'm going to start there with just a very quick definition of the thing. And then we can move on into maybe like, what's a good game to start with?
Yeah.
Like how do you, if you want to play a tabletop role-playing game, where's a good place to start?
Also, Hermes, thank you so much for the cheers.
Ooh.
Oh, and also, I will also add to this, chat, those of you who are familiar with TTRPGs, feel free to also chime in, because there's a real possibility we might not be able to get to like all the things that are happening in chat. So like,
Yeah.
All right, Karaoke Night, welcome. Says, okay, I feel extra baby today because I barely even know how to ask my questions, but I have one. All right, I'm ready. We're ready.
Rock it.
We're
ready,
so
ready.
ready for you. What are the different types, says Littlest Drummer, of like role-playing games?
Mhm.
Oh boy, I wouldn't even know how to begin to classify that.
I think it's
There's
So
so
I
many out there right now. Like there's so many. I wouldn't even know how to begin to classify them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to avoid answering that question by listing all of the different kinds of TTRPG systems. I'm going to kind of put them into broad chunks, and I think you have on a I think like
Hold on, can I stop you for a second? Because I think there's two different ways to potentially answer that question. Because there's there's the way of answering the question that's like, what are the different types of games, as in like the games designed, and then what are the different types of games, like in terms of styles of games played, right? By which I mean like you've got like, and the differences between them are, for instance, like you've got like the like crunchy, rules heavy, combat based, right, versus something opposite of that. And then the other category of like way of answering that question is like how the different types of ways the GM can run the game, right? Like the things that they emphasize. So like
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking in terms of the former, like going
Sure,
like, okay,
sure,
so
sure.
like you got your everybody knows what Dungeons and Dragons is, and that's like your very simulationist, like very lots of rules, sort of crunchy, like pretty complex game that is like it's a tabletop role playing game, but it's also designed to simulate a very specific kind of experience in pretty much every mechanic that it gives you, and it has a lot of mechanics. And so that's Dungeons and Dragons being like the monolithic kind of archetypal game. And then I think, there's a lot of shades of gray between like that. There are things you would be surprised to know that are more complicated than Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not familiar with them because Dungeons and Dragons and similar games are frankly about my limit for the amount of like crunch in them.
Looking at you, GURPS second edition.
Yeah, looking at you, GURPS.
Right.
So there are games that are even more simulationist than that. And then there are also tabletop role-playing games that are kind of simpler, smaller things with just a few mechanics. So if you look at something like
Laser.
Troika is another
I was gonna say
fantasy
Lasers
role.
Feelings.
Laser. I think that's even a step down. So like,
Yeah,
I'm shooting for like the midpoint between
gotcha.
like D
Oh,
and
I
D
see,
and
I
that.
see. I thought you were doing
So
the
like,
extreme endpoints. So
yeah. I suppose like the other like way, like as Lucas said, the other like end of the spectrum when it comes to tabletop role playing games, I think is something like John Harper's Lasers and Feelings, which if you just Google that, it's a one sheet RPG that I keep handy next to my desk. This right here. Hold on, it's right here. One of these sheets of paper. This is the whole game. The whole game fits on one page of paper. And frankly, if you want to start playing tabletop role playing games and running them, these are good places to start.
yeah. As far as like breaking them down, I think there's honestly so many different ways of like categorizing tabletop RPGs that are designed to do different things, and many of those ways of categorizing are subjective. um like you could say that like some people would say, oh yeah, Cypher is like, a lot more like narrative and rules light. But if you were here for last week's conversation with Sam DeLev, you would realize that like that's how it bills itself, but it isn't necessarily that. But some people might feel it is. So as far as classifying like broad categories, have done that. I think the only way that I would say can be done in a way that isn't just overly complex is that there are games that are this is how my personal like how I tend to divide games is there's like games that are more narrative is the wrong word, but they're games that tend to be about building a fiction, right? Like engaging in a particular type of fiction. And then there's simulationist games which are much more on like on the end of the spectrum that are more like Warhammer and like tabletop war games, right?
Yeah.
They're not the same thing, obviously, because they're not war games. They're still role playing games because they're not built as in like there's two sides. There's a winner and a loser, and the rules make everything fair for everybody. Like it's a role playing game, which means that it's not built that way, but it is simulationist in the sense that a lot of them it has a lot of really complicated mechanics to not create like a fiction of something real, but to simulate the real thing. And it's like without a specific example. Crunchy versus creamy. Hell yeah. Let's go. Thank you, Quinn.
Yeah. There's a lot of dials on
Yeah.
TTRPGs that make it very hard to kind of break them up into big chunks, I think. And that's a little bit the thing here. Because like I think with books, it's easier to break them down into genres, whereas with like tabletop role-playing games, TTRPGs, we're going to use that a lot tonight as a shortener. There's a lot of dials from like how crunchy, in terms of crunchy being like how complex mechanically is this system, how many mechanics are there, and how much do they interplay with each other, versus like how simple or how few mechanics are there. And then there's also like, is this game focused mostly on storytelling, is it more focused on simulationism? Like, there's and those are just the two kind of like sliding scales that come to mind first. You can also then begin also to talk about genre, like are they genre specific? Do they come with a setting baked into them? But I think like
Right.
the
That's
most stare. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's another way of like a game that's designed with a setting, a specific setting in mind. Like, um, I mean, technically Pathfinder is built on something. Pathfinder's not a great example, but Pathfinder, like it is built like for a specific world. Like there are not many different like settings for Pathfinder. There's Golarion. That's Pathfinder, right? Like that's that
Mm-hmm.
world. Versus like and games like gosh, there's some games that are basically designed for a specific setting and genre, and then there's some games like Cipher that tries to solve the problem
Numenera.
of like no, there's some games like Cipher, not
Mm-hmm.
Numenera, some games like Cipher that try to solve the problem of like, hey, I like this system but I want to play a different genre, and they end
Mm-hmm.
up trying to be the kind of catch-all, like just like genre agnostic is the term that it's often used for
Yeah.
systems like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and setting
I was.
agnostic.
Yeah, I was trying. Sorry, when I said Numenera, I was trying to staple it back to the part of the conversation where you were searching for like things
Yeah,
that like have a setting
and
that
I was
come
doing
with
the
them.
opposite of that.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, basically, like, unfortunately, Littlest Drummer, like that was like that question. There's so many different ways of like blocking out different types of TTRPGs because there's so many of
Mm-hmm.
them out there, and all of them have like have different. I don't know. There's so many. There's not really any defined category of TTRPG, at least not easily so, and many of them tend to be subjective. So
Yeah.
like
Because
that's a tough question, I think.
there's also getting into like things like is it do you want to like how many players do you want to play with, and how long, like in a micro like how long are you looking for your session to be, like how much time do you have, and then
See,
how
oh, go ahead.
are
Sorry.
these are sessions connected, or are they kind of
Yeah.
single use things, like there's
So
all of those can be covered by tabletop role playing games is the wild part of this.
the good news is that none of that, like classifying them, literally doesn't matter.
Nope.
That's the good news. So like while this
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a really complex and like really in the weeds way to start this session that's this episode that's supposed to be for people who like don't know a lot, the main takeaway that you should take from that whole everything we've talked about just up until now is that you can pretty much ignore everything we just said.
what
None
you
of
can take
Mhm.
yeah,
yeah, what you can take away from it is not that like, oh my god, this is unapproachable, is that what you can take away from this is that no matter your level of experience or skill with these games, there is something, or the amount of time that you have or the genre that you want to play, there is something for you to play.
exactly. And I think furthermore, what happens, and this is always so sad to me because there's so many people that I've known who've like bounced off of TTRPGs when they tried it, but if they had tried a different one, I think then they might have actually like found something to latch onto, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like not everybody loves D&D when they first play it. I was one of those people. I did not like D&D when I first tried it. Um, and luckily for me, I was already into TTRPGs before I tried D&D, or else I might have just said, this whole thing really isn't for me. So the takeaway here is that if you try something, if you try a TTRPG and you don't like it, the takeaway should be there might be another game that you would like. So that's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, the main takeaway.
Yeah, if you like the idea of a role playing game, or like a kind of performative game, or like a more freeform game, some like a collaborative game that is more freeform than like a board game, um, then like TTRPGs are probably for you. Like if you want to do something with your friends that is collaborative, that is like kind of creative, but that has a little bit of structure to it, then like the tabletop role playing games are there will be one out there for you. It's just kind of a matter of finding what one you like. And like D&D is that monolithic one that everybody knows of, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is the easiest game in the world to learn and play.
Mm-hmm.
All of this on my bookshelf right here, those are all D&D books. and not everybody has the time to buy and read all of these.
Yeah, Ramblemancy 1-page RPG win.
That's an excellent idea for like a charity stream
Oh my
goal or
God.
something.
That
I
would
would do
be
it.
interesting. Hold on.
You have 2 stats, Ramble and Mancy.
I want to get to Karaoke Night's question because I thought it was a good
Yes.
question. How do you prepare for a game story-wise, keeping in mind that the game isn't meant for the players to act out your story, but to discover their own adventure? How do you prepare but also give players freedom? Okay, so I have actually a lot of opinions about this. So this is more of a question for like new GMs, but I think it's still worthwhile for players to know some of this.
Mhm.
I think this is an issue that a lot of people have attempted to address in various ways on like YouTube channels or blogs or whatever. And I think what it kind of comes down to, and I actually, so Bree had recently her the one shot that she did on her channel, and she asked me for like just a little general advice on like how to run a one shot for a stream, and the advice that I gave her with the giant caveat that is there are good reasons why I have never run just a one shot on a stream. So I wasn't necessarily the best person to ask, but I think the advice that I gave her, I think it still applies, and that is that like some like freedom is good, and when for your player freedom is good. I think the important thing is you always have to make sure that your players have, especially if you're doing a much shorter form game where you have to fit a lot of story into a shorter amount of sessions, a fewer amount of sessions. The important thing is that sometimes like the red herring is like making sure that players have choices. Choices aren't always good because sometimes choices get players stuck, right? Discussing and turning them over and going over and over again, not actually getting anywhere. But agency is really important, which is basically the how of things, right? You don't necessarily. I think there's a lot of like negativity towards like railroading and being on the rails, right? Which is, I think, one of those terms that has been used so much that it has lost entirely its meaning, and it basically gets used at the drop of a hat. And I say this as somebody who still fears railroading their players. So like say like that sometimes it's okay to tell your players what they're doing. Like tell them don't say, okay, where do you want to go? Say, okay, you are going to this place, blah blah blah. Because the important thing, the thing that the players will actually care about, is the how, right? How do we solve this problem? Not what problem are we solving, but how do we solve the problem? And that, I think, is where that's gameplay. That's where the gameplay happens, right? Where the players are not arguing about like which door do we go through or that kind of, or like do we go to the dungeon or do we go to the mountains, right? When they're instead discussing like how do we deal with this new problem that's in front of us, right? It's like that's an excellent way of putting this, Quinn. I don't dislike being on rails. I'm just not going to keep my hands in the cart at all times. Exactly.
Nor should you.
Nor should you. What's that? They're more like actual guidelines than rules.
Yeah.
The rails are there to just sort of. The rails are helpful. The rails tell players what's expected of them, right? So that they can help you and be part of the collaborative experience, right? This is a little bit in the weeds of like DMing, but I think it's not an unhelpful thing to like think about when you're running a game. So like rails good sometimes. The important thing is letting like it's also okay to say no to players sometimes if something that they do is either going to be wildly out of character for their character, or if it's going to destroy the fiction that you are all trying to build. That's okay. Um, the important thing is not to sort of thwart players' attempts at things, like to sort of manipulate things to thwart their attempts to do stuff, just because it doesn't fit the narrative that you have built in your mind for what should happen,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
give players opportunities to feel powerful and to use the thing, like to use their characters' mechanics. Like it shouldn't be the goal to make sure the rogue is discovered, but um make sure that the I'm gonna assume we're playing D&D here for the sake of argument, right? Because I think we all kind of know what D&D is. You have wizards and rogues, and clerics, and rogues are the sneaky ones, and wizards are the magic users, and clerics are the healy people, and the barbarian hits things with a sword or an axe or a mace. Make sure that your barbarian has a chance to hit something or use his big muscles to force his way through something or pick something up or move something. Make sure that the cleric has an opportunity to obliterate some undead with holy magic. Make sure that your wizard has an opportunity to use has opportunities to use their spells at some point, and make sure the rogue has, I don't know, some locks to pick,
Yeah.
some places to sneak around. Like it's more about, like, when you're preparing for a game, about kind of creating around a problem, like creating a problem and everything around it, but not really creating any solutions
And
to
I think, yeah, I think so. It's like to kind of come back to Karaoke Night's question as to like how do you do that? How do you ensure all of these things? I like to think of it like connect the dots, where you the GM don't know really what the whole picture is supposed to look like. Um, and so like what what the different. Actually, this is your actually. You know what, Karaoke Night, your analogy is way better. Put them on the train and stop it. Stop at different attractions filled with bait. Sure, that's certainly one way to do it. Absolutely, that would work. Um, and to kind of go along with what I was saying and using your analogy, you know kind of where the stops are. You just don't know where they're gonna end up. Right? Like, make sure that like
That's good.
right, like you know where the stops are, and then leave. In fact, when I'm planning for a session, more often than not, I'll have like a specific encounter in mind that I know they're going to run into, or like I'll have a specific plot thread that I know that they're going to run across. And then I kind of loosely know how, like, about an event that happens after that point, and then I intentionally leave the stuff in the middle kind of amorphous.
Yeah. Knowing things like, I know that this person is someone I want them to run into tonight. I know that I want to run this monster tonight, or this group of monsters in this kind of setting. If you're playing that sort of game, like having those loose ideas of things that you would like to happen or things that you would like your players to encounter. And then I think the other half of that planning is kind of just knowing a little bit about the setting or the world that you're running in, so that you can figure out how those three things fit together. What I want to run, the world that we're in, and then my players and their needs, wants, and actions.
Yeah. And to use the train analogy again, sometimes it is okay to say, no, we are not stopping at this stop.
Yes.
Sometimes that's okay, because especially I will caveat and say that's more important if you're like doing a one shot, or you have like a finite number of sessions that you want to do whatever it is you're going to do in, because the reality is at a certain point, like, you kind of do want to get them on the rails, because the important thing, like from the player perspective, is that they get the chance to feel like they are solving problems, and not so much that they get to choose their own destinies or whatever, right? The important thing, because that's sometimes too much choice can be paralyzing, and that will often lead to a lot of really sort of dead space, and like players just sort of looking at you blankly, hoping against hope that you will just drop something in front of them and tell them what to do. And like that's not a great feeling all around for anybody
Yeah.
on either side of that equation. So Yeah.
And I'll say, even on kind of a granular level too, this is actually, Lucas, I think a piece of advice that you gave me very early on in my GM career. But like, if there are things that you want players to engage with, the reality of tabletop role-playing games is most of them takes place, unless you are drawing out maps or something like that, most of them take place up here. The players have no idea what is in your head as the GM until you speak it into the world. And so when you describe something, that now exists in your players' collective conscious. So if there's something that you want your players to engage with, then lavishing a little bit of description on that, like making sure to kind of point it out just by mentioning its existence and talking around it, is a way that you can kind of nudge your players towards a thing that you want them to do something with. And if they don't notice, then you can describe how it changes throughout the course of a scene, or is it like while the players are doing something else, mention it again. And if, like, a lot of times those are simply by mentioning pieces of the world, you will a lot of times attract your players to them. And so if there's something that you want players to engage with, deciding on that in advance and mentioning it.
I have another thing to say about that, kind of on the other side of that. But first, good night, Quinn. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Good night, Quinn.
Hope you have a good sleep.
Right. I remember I was given this piece of advice because I had lavished a lot of description on a thing that was ultimately like not relevant at all.
And that's what I was gonna say. There is the caveat here that sometimes you do that because there's something that you're just trying to be very like colorful with your detailing of the world, and your players take the wrong cue from that and go, and go, oh, this must be important. Sometimes a chair is just a chair.
A soaring cathedral with stained glass windows. Yeah, no, it's just a church of Palor. It's just a church of the sun god. It's fine. There's nothing going on here. Gazebo. You have angered the gazebo. You must face the gazebo alone.
Perfect example of that. Oh my god, Hermes. We yes, same brain. Yeah, wow. I hope any of that was helpful. I feel like we've started getting a little bit into the weeds on that. If you want us to go back and kind of like clarify something, we can try to do that. But like, genuinely, I think the most the most important thing to remember is like, and you're not gonna, if you're just starting out GMing, you're not gonna be like perfect at it right away. One of my favorite pieces of advice that Matt Colville, that's right, who saw that coming? One of my favorite pieces of advice that Matt Colville gives is that when you're starting out, you're gonna be bad at it. Like, and that doesn't sound particularly encouraging, but the reality is that I don't think that there is another way to be good at it. Is you kind of have to go through that period. Like, every time, the way that I have, like, let's see, not, some people have their GMs that they had that they're like, oh yeah, I want to be like that GM, right? I didn't really have that. The way that I got to where I am with GMing was largely through, I knew what I was trying to evoke, right? I knew the thing that I was trying to evoke, and I thought, here's how can I best make that happen at the table, either through my descriptions, through maybe mechanics that I decided to throw in, or different tactics and techniques to try to get it's actually probably very similar to teaching, frankly, where you're like, I know what I want to teach, what I want them to take away from this lesson. How do I what strategies, what techniques do I use to make that happen, right? And then I would just do it. And if I could tell it wasn't working, then I would try to, afterwards, I'd think about it and go, okay, why didn't that work? What specifically about that didn't work? And then how can I fix that? And then the next time, I would just try my fix. And I just keep repeating that process until I got it to work finally, until I finally got it to work. And then I would say, okay, this worked. Can I do it again? Or was this specific to those circumstances? And once I do that a few times, I just take that, whatever technique I eventually settle on, and that becomes integrated into like my style of GMing. It becomes a technique that is now forever at my disposal. But the reality is I couldn't do that without first being bad at it, right? Without first not being able to achieve the thing that I was trying to. So yeah, that's what I got for you.
It is, as someone with a teaching degree, like teaching and GMing are very similar to each other in some ways. Like the kind of the way that the self-reflection aspect of it too, in like, okay, so here's what I was trying to deliver, and that clearly didn't get across. So how am I going to do that differently next time? Thank you, Matt.
That one's not fair, Matt. I baited him into that. I set him up for that one.
I walked right into the landmine.
Yeah.
But there is like also kind of learning. Teaching is a collaborative act. It's not a teacher to students like one way highway thing, and GMing is the same way. It's a two-way street. Instructions unclear. Everyone is learning how to play Baby Shark.
Go do it. Let's go.
Baby Shark.
No, stop it. Not on this channel.
And if you go into anything, going to divert away from this Baby Shark.
Yes.
Then you have to stumble through it a few goes before you actually get to a point where it's the flow, you're flowing with it. So that just goes for anything, I think.
That's
really
true. Absolutely. And additionally, I think this is a more advanced GM tip that I will throw out there, but it's one that I see GMs. It's a pitfall that I see GMs fall into all the time, including me. I do this too. I've done this too, and I've had to check myself on it. But don't ever stop that process. Don't ever stop that. Do not ever assume that you have succeeded, that you have arrived, because there will always be it's a very non-linear kind of like progression in GMing, right? And I think this is probably true of being a player too, but in different things. But it's very non-linear progression in this. You learn about a bunch of stuff. You get really good at doing something, and then you'll see somebody who's doing something that you maybe never thought of doing, and you're like, "That's fucking dope. I want to try. Can I do that?" And then you just try to replicate it. Honestly, this is why I love talking about this stuff, because I genuinely believe this is the best way that anybody learns to GMing, is just stealing ideas from other people, and sharing like the things that we do that worked for us, and passing those on. Say, try to make it work for you, right? I don't know if it'll work for your game. I wish I could audit your game, but I can't. And so like that's something that the most I can do is say, here's what I did. Try it and see if it works. And if it does, fantastic. And if it doesn't, maybe you can build on it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was hesitant to say like keep going until you get good, because as soon as you're like you get to if you're like that, which to the point where like I have arrived, I can't imagine that, honestly, for myself. Like I don't want to ever arrive. There's so many avenues and different places to take it, and it's the same with any kind of performing arts too, and especially what I'm familiar with is magic, because I've done a handful of magic and sleight of hand type things. It's the same thing. If you think you've arrived and you carry yourself with that attitude, it's tiring.
Yeah.
There's just so much. It's boundless. Also to go a little bit on something that's not as important but kind of important. A chair is just a chair. To that point.
Incredible.
the physical comedy here tonight.
I can't believe he just did that. All right. Okay.
Freeman Loma, everybody. Let's give it up. Hold on. I have an emote for this. Incredible. For this. Hold on. We'll snap some.
Um,
I fully had a comment that I was going to make, and I have been fully distracted by the chair bit. Evergreen, frankly. Evergreen.
So I hope
It
any
was-
of that was like actually helpful, because some of that was a little bit getting into the weeds a little, but it's a skilly suit.
Freeman's ghillie suit is really good these days.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah, it was a little bit getting into the weeds and getting a little ways away from like, I think the core topic of this episode, but yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something else, but it's gone now, so there's no weeds. There's only Zool.
Yeah. I think like one of the things that I've been thinking about tonight too is like if you're trying to go into GMing tabletop role-playing games, then like one of the easiest ways to ensure that you're meeting that your players are getting what they want out of it as well is also just to remember that they're playing, like it's in the name, like you are all playing the game. You're just you're just occupying a slightly different role, and you can play off of them. Like if a player does something or asks a question that you think the answer to is really cool, you can just decide that that's what's going on now and play along with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that will wind up with a lot of cool situations where players will be like, oh wow, could it be this? And if you're sitting there going, oh wait, that's so cool, then like odds are that yes, you can just play off of that, and then later on your players will be like, I can't believe that was so cool that you foreshadowed that. And I was like, yeah, definitely foreshadowed it, and definitely didn't just decide that yes, it was something like that when you mentioned it.
Yeah.
So this comes from a chronic, like kind of pantser GM, but your players at the table are also your resource. And so just listening to them and riffing off of them is another, like part of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes also, as I often say about you, chat, collectively, you are smarter than we are. Same is true as your players. There's one of you. There's a lot more of them, and chances are they're gonna come up with something you didn't think of, and when they think of it, you're gonna be like, "Fuck, that's so much better. It's so much better than what I wrote down." Sure. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
On the subject of like, kind of, not that I don't want to address like beginning GMing stuff, because I think that's important too.
Yeah.
But like, well, I want to go like, as I said, we are on a continuing mission to ensure that the ratio of GMs and players evens out at some point. But until that day comes, it is still right now probably the smart play when talking about getting into TTRPGs to talk more on the player side of stuff than on the GM side of stuff.
Yeah, there are generally more of those involved in a TTRPG session than there are GMs.
That's not to say if y'all have like questions specifically about like GMing, you can feel free to ask, but and we'll do what we can. But I also want to make sure that like people who are not like here to learn about GMing or any of that stuff actually also get things that they want. But
yes,
yeah.
Blush Monster Lucas in the chat.
Oh, hello. Honestly, you know what? You are all very welcome. I love doing it, and I love getting to share it with all of you. It's great. Genuinely one of my favorite things. So, yeah. Let's see.
Yeah. So I think if you're looking to just like get into TTRPGs from the player standpoint, then I think like your step one is to find some friends who you know play tabletop role playing games, and ask them if you can play with them, and I guarantee you that they will be super excited that you're asking. And if they're not, then like, I don't know, fuck them. Find somebody else who wants to play. But like most often, if you ask,
and if they don't want you, fuck them.
Damn. Yeah.
Jonathan Boyle, everybody.
not literally. But yes, if you have a friend that you know plays tabletop role playing games, that's a really good place to start, because odds are if you go, hey, so that Dungeons and Dragons thing that you do like every week or every other week, would do you want to talk to me about a little bit about that? They will 100% say yes. So probably like an 80% chance that they're going to want to tell you right then and there about it. But if you don't have a friend like handy that plays them, then just getting a few of your friends together, um, and and grabbing a game like Lasers and Feelings, something that's very, very simple, that the rules are very short, and the reason that you can basically learn together in one evening and sit down and play. And I think that's probably the best place that you can start. There's lots of stuff that you can do. There are a million hacks of Lasers and Feelings. There's one that I wrote called Kobolds and Trenchcoats, which is like a little bit thank you for the clip, Hermes. Which, you know, is like a little bit like fantasy role-playing game referential, so maybe not a good starting point. But there is one where you play like a leverage style like heist, in which you are stealing Carly Rae Jepsen's songs that are like kept away in a vault for a rainy day.
That's a real thing. That's based on a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, no, there is just like a locked away vault, metaphorically or literally, I'm not sure, of Carly Rae Jepsen's unreleased songs. And so somebody made a Lasers and Feelings hack about stealing those and publishing them.
Also, hi Cole.
Hi Cole.
Yeah, I think, okay, look, I think probably one of the most obvious questions when it comes to like getting into TTRPGs for the first time is how. And I think there are, like, well, John addressed one way, I think, which is like find somebody that you know that like plays TTRPGs and see what they have to say. Maybe see if like they'd run a game for you, or maybe invite you to the one that they've already got ongoing. That's a perfectly fair way to do it. The other way, which is has a bit more chaotic energy to it, which who doesn't love that? Just get a bunch of your friends together who don't know anything about what the fuck you're doing, and just try to sit there and figure it out together, because that is how I learned to play Pathfinder. A group of us who didn't know shit about fuck got together with the Pathfinder starting set, and we just sat down and tried to parse the rules, and then we just went from there. Like that was my introduction to the D20 system, like the D20, yep. Like the three.
Just come into your board game night.
Yeah, mine was a little hectic too. Oh, absolutely. Just have a I know Clue is like whatever, but I still like I want to play Clue with a group of people who then role play the characters. I think that's still fun.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that.
I did that once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played Professor Plum, I think, but
that's incredible.
Oh, it was good. It was fun.
Yeah,
just making a board game with no that does not require that usually at all, and then just make it that's your night.
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, let's make this Clue but extra.
Yeah,
let's make it wild.
And like that, the approach of just jumping into the deep end might seem intimidating, but the best thing is that in theory nobody knows how the fuck this shit works, and you're all just trying to figure it out together and learning together. And like the thing is, you're probably gonna get a lot of the rules wrong or misinterpret them or whatever, and that's fine, because this is me quoting Matt Colville quoting somebody else, but essentially the map is not the territory. The books, the rules are not the game. The game is just what happens at the table. So like if you're all having a good time, if you're trying to like figure out the rules and like whatever, and you're like, who cares if you're getting some of them wrong? Like if none of you know what's going on, but you're still having a good time, then congratulations, you just played a TTRPG.
Matthew Gravelin, designer of Mall Kids, a game in which you play a bunch of teenagers causing shenanigans in a mall, is famously on record on this channel is saying, I don't think that I've ever seen a live play of Mall Kids in which they used they played like by the rules that I have written. I don't think I've ever seen a game of Mall Kids played where they played the game that I wrote. And that to me is a little bit the essence of tabletop role-playing games, is that like you can play Monopoly one way. You can play Dungeons and Dragons, or you can play Lasers and Feelings so many different ways. And whether or not you're getting it right, or whether or not you're getting the rules right, have very little impact on the enjoyment of the game. If you're not playing Monopoly right, it's people are like, if you're not playing a lot of board games right, it's probably not going to be a super enjoyable experience. But tabletop role-playing games, if you forget how mounted combat works in Dungeons and Dragons, it's not a big deal.
Show of hands, who actually knows how that works? Nobody. I will answer that for you.
I'm going to slide beneath the table to illustrate
nobody knows how mounted combat works.
Mounted combat.
Nobody knows.
I did for like one day.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why I only knew it for one day, because I considered it for a character. And then
works in 5e. Fuck, I've run so much 5e, and I think
everybody knows a way that grappling works in 5e. Is it the way? Couldn't speak to that.
That's a good point. That's a good. Can I do this? No, you can't. That's not how it works.
I'll also say that the people. This isn't just necessarily a bunch of unqualified experts giving you permission to not play games the way that they're written. The literal designers of the games will also give you explicit permission to not play their games the way they are written, as long as you're having a good time.
As many times as my barbarian from our home game has been grappled, I should know how it works, but I don't.
Rose, I think that is a more apt description of grappling in 3.5. How does grappling in 3.5 work? It doesn't.
Truly does not.
Whatever you do, have fun doing it. Be gay, do crime. I mean, that's pretty much it right there. Like, that's, I think the, yeah. I think that's pretty much the essence of it. Yeah, it's like,
it's 2 pages. No game mechanic that is not integral to player success should be 2 pages.
Turtle Lord, absolutely incredible. I appreciate you. Grappling causes lack of motion, so by definition it can't do any work.
That
is true. Their speed becomes 0 if they are grappled. That's incredible. That's very true.
Wow. Oh, that's such a great physics joke.
Absolutely incredible.
Oh, that's such a good physics joke. I just have to sit in this for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I am 17 again, and my physics teacher is standing in front of the room.
Before somebody makes a reference to that movie.
17 again. My physics teacher is at the front of the room making, frankly, fucking hysterical math jokes, and I am the only one in the classroom going, and everyone else is just like,
what?
John has become Zephron. Fuck yeah. I do not have the shoulders that man has.
Let's see. I can't stop it. I wasn't planning on it. I just wanted to make sure that you were not the first one to acknowledge the reference. Anyway, what was I don't honestly know where to go from how do you get started. I genuinely don't know, because like from there, I don't know that there's a way of getting into it without like really getting into the weeds. But like, I think it sounds like a sort of a cop-out answer, but really truly, like, if you had fun, if you're having fun, then you're doing it right. Like, that's truly like the most
Yeah.
Grab the essence of what we have said tonight is grab some friends. If they already know how to play tabletop role-playing games, great. If they don't, equally good. Decide on a game you want to play and then just go for it. You can't fuck it up, and as long as you're playing with some people that you like, you're probably going to have a good time. And then the more that you do it, the more that you learn how to do it. Sam was talking a little bit last week about how playing games like this, like anything else that we do, is a skill. You know, running games, being a player, like playing tabletop role playing games, it's just something that, like anything else, you have to learn. It's a it's a sort of semi performative, like, medium. Actually, I think this is a good thing to talk about too. If you are nervous about role playing, I know this is a barrier for some people. They're nervous about like having to act out their character, or role play their character. And we talked about this a little bit last week with Sam, but you don't have to speak all of your character's lines as your character. You don't always have to know what they are doing, or what they're, or like have a clever line or quip for them. It's totally okay if it is what you are most comfortable with to say, okay, my character John the Bard walks into the tavern and asks the barkeep if they have any rooms for the night. And like, congratulations, you've done it. You've just role played.
Yeah. There's this. I think there is a misconception about role playing that in order to do it, you have to like do the voice, right? You have to like have an accent. You have to speak in character. You have to do all this, and the reality is, no, you don't. I mean, I know it has become a meme now on this channel for whenever I reference Matt Colville, but genuinely, I don't think I've learned more about like not just running the game, which is sort of the aim behind like many of his videos on the channel, but also just about like the game itself, aspects of the game. That there's just like, he has a whole video about like role playing and how like really the only thing you need to do to role play, the only thing you need to do is just think about your character, who they are, and act like, make decisions based on what that character would do. And if they are different than what you would do, then congratulations, you're way ahead of a lot of people when it comes to role playing. Like, that's you know. But yeah, genuinely just
self inserts. It's true.
But yeah, genuinely, like, that's really all there is to it. So like, I know that I hear what you're saying, John, is that like, absolutely, that I have also seen that, like, that can sometimes be a barrier for entry for people, but I promise you, it's I think this is probably true of just about anything in D&D or D&D tabletop RPGs that seems intimidating. I promise you, it's a lot less intimidating than it seems like it is.
Yeah. This is a medium, a game, a hobby that is much beloved by Ren Fair kids and much beloved by theater kids, for good reason, because it gives us an outlet for that energy. But you know, it's not a thing that is exclusively for theater kids. So like, you can give yourself permission to role play, to play a character in whatever way you feel most comfortable.
And I will say that there is something to be said also about, because I know that there are a lot of people whose like main exposure to TTRPGs is through actual plays. And the thing is, a lot of actual plays, not all of them, but a lot of them try to intentionally to be more theatrical about their performances, because the difference with an actual play versus at the table, like offline, is that an actual play, you kind of have to worry about being entertaining a little bit. Like, you kind of do. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but if you care about, like, you know, building a channel and building an audience, building, like, you know, that kind of thing, you kind of do have to be entertaining. You got to think about that. At the table, the secret is that, like, because the people at the table are directly involved in what's going on, it's gonna be entertaining for them because they're involved. And that's the only people at the table, your only audience is each other, and those are the only people you need to worry about. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna. I think there is a level of intimidation that I've seen, like online, and like when I used to browse the DM Academy Reddit. There were a lot of people very concerned about, being theatrical, about being, role playing, being entertaining, or making entertaining NPCs, or making their own characters be entertaining. And like, buddy, I think you're working too hard here. I think you're working way too hard. Like, it's gonna be fun. Like, you're gonna have fun at the table. Like, and if you're, like, particularly if your main exposures to TTRPG is like Critical Role, like, not to say anything necessarily negative about Critical Role. It's not about that. It's just that they are, like, the nature of their production is that it is pretty specifically not what a typical D&D game looks like. That's like, they are performing. They're performing on purpose. There's definitely nowhere close to enough pizza on the table. So, total side note, speaking of Critical Role, I genuinely miss the days. I genuinely miss the days when, like, Ashley Johnson was just eating constantly during the game. Like, at no point was she not eating, and it was just incredible. Like, I loved that. I love that for her.
It was so good. I do appreciate that still every so often on Dimension 20 shows that someone will give Brennan shit for snacking. Like,
yeah. Like, I understand why they stopped doing it. I do get it. It makes sense to me, but like, I do kind of miss it. Anyway,
yeah. Key component of any tabletop RPG experience if you're playing in person, which is snacks. Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
True.
Let people eat.
Yeah.
Bring snacks.
See, that's the other thing, right? I think we sort of we had at our home game, Freeman, we had sort of like an unspoken social contract, right? That, like, people just brought snacks. And like, there was a time, like, in our earliest iteration of our home game, where, like, there was sort of like a rotating cycle of, like, well, but like not like scheduled or like that we even talked about. It was just sort of like, oh yeah, well, you brought all this stuff last time, so I figured I would bring stuff this time, and like, it was that kind of thing. And like, that's cool. See, like, I love that kind of thing. And it's not done in a way of like, where like, all right, well, I brought this time, so next time you got to bring something. It's just like, it's like,
no, it's never like that. It's definitely an unspoken thing. It's just like, it's understood.
It's just understood. Like, just bring snacks. Unfortunately, as the GM, I have difficulty. I cannot do that because then I'll be like talking around food. Most of what my time is spent talking, right? At least players, like, if you're not immediately involved, like, you can eat, but like the GM is literally always involved. So yeah. So
called out for this entire conversation. Just putting that out there.
Hey, this is for you, buddy. This whole thing, it's for you, specifically you. No,
all the NPCs just need to be like snacking on a piece of like of jerky or a trail ration.
Flashing back to the Gift of Goblins one shot where Jake had a fucking charcuterie board in front of him.
The cheese block.
At any time.
The block of cheese still.
The block of jalapeno cheese.
That's still
amazing.
Just, yeah.
For those who have not seen our Christmas special from this last year, I put together a goblin-themed Honey Heist hack in which we all played goblins trying to save Christmas. Their own Christmas by getting cocoa, but in doing so, accidentally saving Christmas for everybody else.
And also saying fuck you to capitalism. So
yes, and very important part is saying fuck you to capitalism. But anytime a particular NPC was on screen, Jake was eating, like, the NPC was eating something, and so was Jake.
He just kept pulling stuff out of his it wasn't like actually in his jacket. He was like reaching down to like whatever, and then just
Yeah, no, like make it look like he pulled it out of his vest off of the plate in front of him, but just like the incredible degree of things that he had. Fucking pocket meat. That's exactly what I was thinking about too.
Yep.
Pocket meat.
I love the pocket bit when you just keep pulling random things out from the pocket. Like there's no way there's one more thing in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what have I got? Okay, I've got one of these. I just kind of, you got one of these, and you like rummage around some more. I got one of these, and like just keep pulling things out.
We had a friend in high school who had a coat that contained half of Walmart in it. So I always think back on that and I laugh and I think
That's very true. I still don't know how, but the thing is, with him, it wasn't a bit. Like he just actually had all that stuff in his coat. I don't know how.
Was actually a wizard, probably.
Yeah, like I've worn that. I wore that coat, and unless there's like the coat is entirely made of pockets, I have no idea how he put everything in there.
A whole pizza.
That's right. He smuggled an entire pizza into a theater once,
and it was warm. It was like actually cooked.
I don't know where he got the pizza because there was not a pizza place close enough. Anyway, that's not important.
True.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Pocket pizza. Ah, surprise. Anyway,
this is why calzones were invented to make pocket. This is why calzones were invented to make pocket pizza less messy.
That's. I think that's historically very.
I think that is actually accurate. Like it might not be accurate, but it's not inaccurate.
Pocket zone.
What? What did you
calzone
say?
pocket
No,
zone?
I understand, but anyway.
I'm not going to speak the other portmanteau that just came into my head. I'll save that for when the cameras are no longer rolling.
Oh my god. Amethyst says, I once stuck a liter of milk and a bunch of chocolate chip cookies into a movie theater. No regrets. Nor should you have them. That's, yeah. Is that a line, buddy? Right. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I have like a ton of other stuff. Like the reality, here's where I'm having my difficulty. And I actually said this to Amethyst the other night when we were talking, that my hesitation with doing something like this, like I'm fine doing like a Ramblemancy on it, right? But doing like a whole series, like I think Amethyst put this in the suggestion box a while back. My hesitation with doing like a whole series on this is, one, production. It'll take a lot. But two, there's lots of people, so many people, who have basically covered the like TTRPGs for beginners thing in a way that they will be much better at doing because of the format, right? Because mostly it's on YouTube, where they have like editing at their disposal and they can do jump cuts and like put fun graphics on screen and stuff like that. Whereas for us, we tend to be very like live form, like long form kind of thing. And as you saw from the very beginning of this episode, it's hard for us without the use of editing, which none of us are particularly proficient at, or particularly interested in becoming proficient in. It's hard to like make actual like concise points that will be about getting started, that will actually be useful to anybody who's wanting to start out. And so that's kind of my struggle, right? Like I want to be able to help get more people into, TTRPGs and whatever, but I don't know that I'll be able to do it in a way that's actually helpful to them. In a way, give you information that will be helpful to you, because I genuinely don't know what it is that you need to hear in a general sense, right? Like if you as an individual came to me and were like, hey, I have this problem, then I might know what to tell you. But like just sort of like sitting here and going on for an hour and a half about, how to get started in tabletop RPGs, I don't know that this is the best format for that. So, compile recommended instructional videos. And yeah, that was kind of the solution that I proposed to Amethyst the other night when we were talking about this, is that like there is conveniently a channel in our Discord for Ramblemancy, and for TTRPG discussion also. There's another one for TTRPG discussion where we honestly could just start compiling videos. Like, I know Matt Colville has a great one that is just for players who are brand new. It's an incredible video, where it's not an instructional video, but it is, like all of his videos, it's not instructional, but it is educational. And
I can hear Matt Colville opening that video already with something like, "You're watching this video because you
I'm almost certain that, like, word for word, that is like how he begins the video. I'm almost positive it's something like that. But
complete with the pause and then continuing.
Yeah, I'm almost positive. Matt Colville is a great one, although most of his videos are geared towards people who are starting, who want to become GMs.
The D&D, I think, channel also has done, like, I think D&D does have a YouTube channel that I think, like, Satine Phoenix might do, like, a kind of, like...
Do they? I guess I've never
I
really
remember
paid
there was
attention.
GM tips with Matt Mercer for a while.
And then there was GM tips with Satine Phoenix, which I actually liked hers better.
Yeah,
I liked hers a lot better. Not that Matt Mercer didn't do a good job. It's just that, like, he was given a very specific it was clear he was given a very specific window in which he had to, like, condense a bunch of very like complex topics, and it's tough to get. And Satine was given a lot more like airtime for that to do hers, so I think it worked out a lot better. And she brought on guests and stuff like that, and that was cool. So
so I think
I gotta rewatch those. I gotta rewatch those, is what I was saying.
Yeah, I'd love to.
But yeah, those are ones for... I personally don't know many that off the top of my head that do the, like, you know, for, like, the players side of that, like getting into TTRPGs, but I know they're out there. I just don't know any that I specifically would recommend. But, like, that's what the Discord is for, honestly. Like, because if some of y'all know some, this is your time to shine. See, this is the thing. This is why it's important. This is why the community part of, like, Rule of Lore is so important, right? Because, like, it's not just up to us, the content creators, TTRPG content creators, to, like, help new folks find inroads into the hobby. It's also up to some of you who are out there, the veterans, who, like, know, like, things that we don't, to be able to sort of, like, post some videos in the chat, in the Discord, that kind of stuff. So, like,
and I suppose, like, one of the things that we said earlier was find some friends and do the thing. And we've mentioned our Discord.
An LFG channel.
We have an LFG channel, and we have the TTRPG discussion channel in our Discord. Like, our community Discord is an amazing place. And, like, any like tabletop RPG or a lot of nerd communities in this corner of the internet, whether or not they are specifically a tabletop role-playing focused channel like we are probably going to have people who do that, and oftentimes they'll have channels. So, like, if you're in a few Discords for, like, content creators and stuff, you know, you can look in our Discord, you can look in other people's Discords, looking for group channels and look for, like, discussion channels, and you can read through those. You can pop in and just ask if anybody's got a game that's running, or if anybody could explain something to you.
I know lots of that's a good point. Like, a lot of community Discord channels, for, like, streams or whatever, they'll have LFG channels, and some of those are for streamed games, but not all of them are for streamed games. So and they usually, most Discords that I know, they have some guidelines for people posting in the LFG channels to, like, delineate whether it is a streamed game or like a, you know, non-streamed game. So, like, that is a great resource. I have never used it, but I would not recommend using the Roll20 group finder, because
I've heard
it's a mixed bag. For a lot of people. Anything on the internet, it's gonna be a mixed bag.
It's a little bit like playing pickup games at conventions and stuff like that. And sometimes you're gonna have a perfectly good experience playing with a random group of people, and then sometimes it's
Like
it's a random group of people on the internet.
Geek Outs has some horror stories about that. So
I've heard some of them.
Yeah, they're not not great. So like, but that's why I say like Discords, because chances are if you're already in the Discord server for a community, you already kind of like what that community is about. So you're much more likely to find people that you'll actually enjoy playing with. So like those kinds of things are useful. God, I don't know.
Like I know that there's a lot of people who overlap in both, like in both of these communities, but our Discord and also Bree's Discord, there's a ton of people who play tabletop role-playing games
and occasionally
and chat about them.
Occasionally, but like don't like hold your breath for this, but like occasionally I will find a few extra like brain cells, like just a little extra dab of serotonin, and I'll be able to, I have in the past occasionally run some games for like role community members, but
I think we had some around this last Halloween, didn't we?
not this past Halloween. At least I didn't. Not this past Halloween.
Maybe it was 2 years
ago.
But
yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. So like that is a thing.
Hermie says I found my first long-term campaign to GM on the Streampunks Discord, and like
yeah,
that's another fan. Like I know a lot of us are aware of who the Streampunks are. Quite a few people like running their Discord. That's another great place to look for people. It's another good place to look for people to play with.
Yeah.
So the first step, this is a collaborative hobby. The first step is to find some folks to play with.
Yeah.
And certainly if you have like a bad experience, don't let that tarnish your desire to continue playing. Just leave that particular situation.
Yeah.
Or if it's a situation where you can talk to your GM, try that out. Of course, if you're close with them, that's even better. And if not, then don't feel bad, just leave. But don't let that don't be like, well, I cannot come back to this gaming universe, because there's so many. When you find a good group or multiple good groups, it heals the soul and the heart.
And to build off of that, it is my genuine belief that there are going to be more people that you will have fun playing with than people that you won't. That is like my genuine actual belief.
Mine too.
So especially as the hobby continues to grow. So
this is the tabletop, as evidenced by the very existence of this channel. The tabletop role-playing games, like space between actual plays and games themselves, is in this kind of terrific golden age right now, or like boom, where a lot of people are making them, a lot of people are playing them, a lot of people are interested in them. And like, you are finding more and more that this isn't just like the media stereotype that exists.
I swear to God, if you say basement, John. I swear to God, if you say the word basement.
The media stereotype of a bunch of like super socially awkward kind of like shut-ins playing this weird nerdy game that nobody understands, and they're like all kind of outcasts, is really not the case anymore, nor do I think it has been the case for a very long time. There's a lot I think just about anybody knows what a board game is, and a tabletop role-playing game is just a couple steps further beyond a board game, where you've just removed a few more of the rails and opened it up to kind of be a more creative exercise. So
Amethyst, I think, makes an excellent point, which is says another aspect of the conversation Lucas and I had the other day involved comparing TTRPGs to theatrical productions. In the same way you can put on the same show but have a different experience because it's with a different cast and crew, sometimes you just need the right group. And I will add, I absolutely agree, and I'll build on that. And I'll sort of like kind of the last thing that I'll say about this is that even GMing, like I'll end sort of with a like a personal anecdote from, oh my God, gosh, I want to say that was like 6 years ago, maybe 7, when I Um, I had yet to really get into TTRPGs. Like, I liked them and I wanted to be playing them, running them, and involved in them, but I wasn't like super into them just yet. And the reason was because there was a very particular thing that I wanted, a very particular experience that I wanted out of running the games, and I wanted, but I'd never experienced it. Right, my only experience, and so what I wanted was a game where people like committed, not just to the role playing, but like to their characters, to the emotionality of the various situations, and you know, um, treated the world and the game as seriously as their characters in that situation might. And that's what I wanted. But I had never really experienced that until that point. I mean, close. I'd gotten close in many instances, but never quite what I wanted out of the game. And so I had gotten to a point where I was basically at a point where I thought to myself that, like, okay, I think maybe I just misjudged what this thing is, and what I'm looking for is not something that this can ever be, because asking for my players to bring that to the table, that's it maybe is not a fair thing to ask of people who aren't like professional actors, and who, really like asking them to commit to that level seems like, whatever. So I was pretty settled. I was pretty settled and satisfied. Well, I guess I wasn't satisfied, but I was pretty settled and thinking like, all right, I know what this whole TTRPG thing is now. I know where its limits are, and I guess I'll just have to accept that and be okay with it. Um, and then I started watching Critical Role, and I have my issues with Critical Role now, but we're not going to get into that. For at the time, what I will say about Critical Role is I did learn a lot from watching them play, and the most important takeaways that I took from watching Critical Role was that here was an example of a game that was basically what I wanted from my games, and it was happening. There it was. It was happening. I remember like one of the first episodes I watched, Marisha Ray literally cried in character on screen, and I was like, "Holy shit!" You know, and I remember seeing that and just being like, "Oh wow, so it is possible." Like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't. I'm not. This is not to say that I saw that and was like, "I'm going to recreate this exact game in my game." But no, what I took from it was the thing that I wanted is possible. And honestly, knowing that what I wanted to get out of the game was possible was all it took for me to like get to the point to where and try to bring it about in my game. All it took was knowing that it was possible. And so say that by saying, for all of you new folks who are trying to get into TTRPGs, who have tried and maybe didn't have a great experience with it, like Freeman said, keep trying, because all it takes is for you to know that it's possible, for you to get what you want, what attracts you to the game, to TTRPGs, what attracts you to it, whatever that is, know that game exists. And maybe all it will take is for you to try to bring that to a game. Maybe all it takes is for you to bring that somewhere. So keep trying until you find the thing that you're looking for in a game, because I guarantee you it's out there. So,
I don't think there's a better note for us than that.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us tonight. I hope any of this was helpful. I really hope it was. I am very glad that we decided to have this conversation with y'all, and I'm glad that some of you, came with your questions, with your concerns. honestly, if you have more specific questions, you feel free to come to the Discord. That's what it's there for. And like we or others will be happy to like address those things. So yeah, just go and go join the Discord is what I'm saying. If you're not in there already, you know what to do.
Thank you, moderators, for universally using the meme command that I made. I love all of you. I love all of you
This
so
one?
much.
No, not this one.
No. This chord.
Not this one.
No. That might be it.
Weep, whoop.
Yeah. I've got this chord too. So there's a lot of chords. Anyway, join.
You beat me
Discord.
this time.
I don't
You
get
beat me
the
in
sense
this
that
chord
either
battle.
of you are particularly into this bit right now. So it's just it's habit, right? And this is a habit. A habit.
I'm always into it. I just haven't done it for a while.
It's time to go. We're gonna leave.
Good night, everyone. It's been lovely.
Before I pull out my dozen other chords.
Well,
yes.
Those of you who wish to join tomorrow at the World Builder tier on Patreon, well, we'll be in the Discord, but everybody who is the World Builder tier patrons, we will be hosting tomorrow evening. I think it's 7 Pacific. Is that when it is?
Yes,
So
7 o'clock Pacific time.
We're gonna be hosting our very first Patreon town hall. So we'll be talking about kind of what the immediate future of Rule of Lore looks like, some of the stuff that we're working on, what we're trying to do, those kinds of things. You can ask us questions about what we're doing, about what we're working on. We will answer as many of them as we are able to. Some of them, for many reasons, we will not be able to talk about, but you never know until you ask. So if you're a world builder, do stop by. If you can't be there, we will be recording it and uploading it later. You'll be able to catch that on Patreon as well. After the fact, I don't know exactly when, but in a couple days probably. No more than a few days. And if you aren't one of the world builders and would like to be a part of this, well, now is a great time to join. So you can make sure that you will have that. You'll have access to all of our other Patreon content as well if you do that. So speaking of Patreon, if you are interested in supporting us, but aren't as like, Patreon is definitely the best way to do that. But if you are just subscribed here on Twitch, that's great, because some of our Patreon rewards are available to you through our Discord. So if you connect your Twitch to your Discord and you subscribe, you'll be automatically put into the subscriber rewards channel, and that's where we will post all the stuff for I think the first 2 tiers in our Patreon. You get access to those things. So yeah, that's what I got. If you're subscribed right here, you get some of those Patreon rewards, and they're great. We have a lot of good stuff coming up. So, all right, we're gonna go. We will hopefully see you. What fucking day of the week is it? We'll hopefully see you on Tuesday for In Too Deep. But if not,
right.
We'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. Good night and good zone, everybody.